Hello, everyone, and welcome to Module 4, Civil Liberties. All right, so this week we're going to talk about what civil liberties are. They are the rights of the people, us, to be free from government interference when it comes to our constitutional rights. All right, the rights of the people to be free from the government when such is applied to the Constitution, right? Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the first 10 Amendments, Bill of Rights, and those amendments that came afterwards. All right. As we said, the first 10 amendments were adopted in 1791 and are the people's rights, right? They were adopted after the Constitution was adopted because we felt the founding fathers felt that the people had to have their rights explicitly spelled out so they could be free from the government. All right. The Bill of Rights and the subsequent amendments restrict the government's conduct. They aren't a restriction on the people's conduct. All right. They are the people's rights themselves. All right. So the Bill of Rights, however, interestingly enough, the Supreme Court held in 1833 that the Bill of Rights restricts only the federal government. All right. Only the federal government. It does not apply to the states. All right. You have to rely on your rights as they were expressed in your state constitutions. All right. If the state restricted your right of freedom of speech and it wasn't part of your state constitution, well, then they could. All right. So that is an interesting note that your fundamental rights, your civil liberties, the Supreme Court held back in 1833 that only restricts the government, not the state governments. All right, only the federal government, not the state governments. The exception was Article 1 of the Constitution. All right, so just know that Article 1 of the Constitution was the only exception to that. After the Civil War, however, in 1868, the 14th Amendment was passed. All right, so up until then, there was 3 other amendments that were passed, and then the 14th Amendment was passed in 1868. And the 14th Amendment said that the rights guaranteed to the people apply both to federal and state governments. This is when it switched. So from 1833 to 1868, it was just the federal government. But in 1868, the 14th Amendment was passed, which said that the rights guaranteed to the people apply both to federal and state governments themselves. Specifically, the 14th Amendment said that states. The 14th Amendment states that no state. That's an interesting way to put that. States that no state shall deprive any person. That's a key word. Any person of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. This is known as the Due Process Clause. Right, your property cannot be taken away without due process. All right, without a hearing on the issue. So your life, liberty, or property cannot be taken away without due process. The second part of the 14th Amendment is known as the Equal Protections Clause. All right, so the 14th Amendment has 2 clauses: the Due Process Clause and the Equal Protections Clause. And the Equal Protections Clause says that no state shall deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. All right, the law applies to everyone. No state shall deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of law. All right. To date, the Bill of Rights now applies to states except for the following. All right, we kind of go back and forth here. So the Bill of Rights now applies to the states except for the following: the Third Amendment, the right to be indicted by a grand jury before being tried for serious crimes, part of the Fifth Amendment, and the right to a jury trial in a civil case, which is part of the Seventh Amendment. All right, so the Bill of Rights, all the Bill of Rights applies except for the Third Amendment, which is the quartering of troops. The indicted by grand jury, part of the Fifth Amendment, and the right to a jury trial in civil cases as part of the Seventh Amendment. Okay? All right, the First Amendment. The freedom of expression is broken down into 2 parts, right? Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. All right, this part of the First Amendment is known as the freedom of expression part. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech, which is an expression, freedom of press, of the right of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for redress. It's the first part of the First Amendment, the freedom of expression. The second part is the freedom of religion, right? Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or abridging the free exercise thereof. Okay? So, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. There can be no federal religion that is forced upon you, and you are able to worship as you choose, abridging the free exercise thereof. This thing about these in a little more detail. All right, the First Amendment, part of it is freedom of the press. And this basically means freedom of censorship by the government. Freedom from any government rules telling the news in advance what it can or cannot publish. All right, the freedom of the press. You have a right to publish what you choose as long as it's truth. All right, the Supreme Court has recognized the First Amendment permits restrictions upon the content of speech, though, in a few limited areas. All right, freedom of the press. Now the freedom is pretty much absolute. There are some restrictions during wartime. But another part of the First Amendment, freedom of expression, the free speech, it's guaranteed except in a few limited areas. All right? It used to be under this clear and present danger test. That was the test up until 1919. Not anymore. Okay? Not anymore. That's kind of past now. So now the government can restrict speech that is obscene, that is defamatory, that is fraudulent, insightful, or what we call fighting words. Right? That speech that is integral to commit a crime. So your freedom of expression, your freedom of speech, is absolute with these few restrictions on them. Right? Obscene language is considered not protected. Defamatory language is not protected. Fraudulent speech, stuff that would be insightful, fighting words, or integral to a criminal context or conduct, those aren't protected. All right. So obscenity. How do we define obscenity? I mean, it's not protected speech. Courts reason that it has no redeeming social value, and it's calculated chiefly to appeal to one's sexual rather than political or literary interest. So they felt that since it has no redeeming social value, we can restrict it. Right? It can be restricted by the government. Note, however, that nudity and sex are not, by definition, obscene and are protected by the First Amendment. All right. So, what is obscene? You know, the old saying is, you know when you see it. All right. So, nudity and sex, by definition, however, are not considered obscene and therefore are protected. Like, so yeah, we kind of go back and forth on this stuff, right? Speech is protected. Well, there are some restrictions, but these things don't count as restrictions. All right. So. Obscenity is defined, so if I ask you on the quiz, how do you define obscenity? As appealing to the prurient interest of an average person with materials that lack literary, artistic, political, or any scientific value. All right, that's the definition of obscenity. What it actually means, who knows? All right, and this was the definition as defined by the court in Miller versus California back in 1973. Defamation. All right, defamation. Well, what is defamation? Well, defamation is broken down into two subcategories. Libel, a written statement that defames the character of another person, or slander, all right, which is a spoken statement that defames the character of another person. So libel is written, slander is spoken. Okay? Defamation, however, must harm the person being attacked, right? And truth is a defense. All right, so even though it may harm you, if it's the truth, well, then all bets are off, so to speak. All right, so defamation is saying something bad, defamatory about somebody, must hurt the person. Truth is the defense. All right. Interesting now, but truth is a defense. You must show that the defamatory statement was false if you want to bring a defamation claim. If true, however, no matter how badly it hurt you, it's the truth, so there's nothing you can do, right? You cannot win no matter how badly a person is harmed by a true statement, right? It's true. All right, so defamation, public figures, a little bit different for them, however. Public figures to win a defamation suit, you must show actual malice. You have to show some malice, some above and beyond, right? We hold public figures in a higher regard. So for them to win a defamation suit, they must show actual malice. With actual malice being defined as with knowledge that it was false or with reckless disregard whether it was false or not. Right? So public figures have to have this higher burden to prove in a defamation suit. All right. Freedom of expression. Two interesting cases I just wanted to bring your attention to. There may, according to Texas versus Johnson, there may not be a law. No law can ban flag burning. There may not be a law to ban flag burning. Right? Flag burning is looked at as a free speech. If you want to burn the flag, you're free to do so. Right? Even though it may be insightful to a criminal context or whatever it is, but Texas versus Johnson says you can't enact a law that bans flag burning. It is free speech. And the second thing is, an interesting thing is a school district violates a student's First Amendment rights if it regulates their off-campus speech. Right? So you may be able to, this is interesting, right? The student isn't at the school, the student's off campus, and school may be held liable for trying to do something with that student's right of free speech, even if they are off campus. All right, interesting context. All right, so that's pretty much the first video for this week. If you have any questions, comments, or criticisms, please let me know, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much, everyone.